Okay, hi everyone. Hello. We have a lot of people. Hello. A lot of people. Yeah, you are all muted. I know, you're all muted. So don't worry that you are muted. I will give just like 1 or 2 minutes so that everyone gets connected and everyone is in. But thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for getting your time. And during the webinar, we will be having a presentation. We have guest speakers who will be answering to all the questions that we have gathered so far. So I will ask all the participants of the webinar to be muted and also to turn off your cameras, because we will have the speakers with their cameras on, so the guests with their cameras on, so you will see them while they speak. And then, yeah, I will explain the whole course of the webinar when we start with the presentation, but just a few more minutes so everyone joins. And for acknowledgement for everyone, the webinar is being recorded. So our speakers are okay with it, everyone has agreed. And we will be posting the webinar afterwards online so everyone can access it. Yeah, I think we are all set at the moment. So I will now start with the presentation. Okay. Wait a moment. Yes. Okay. So I think now we're all set. Just to test that we have all the speakers with their microphones available. Oana, Elena, Claudia, I see you all. If Oana, do we have any news from Martin?
I haven't received anything from him yet. I'm checking my emails, but nothing. I think the last thing I knew was that he was trying to connect from a private device.
Okay. Okay, but I hope that, yeah, he can send you a message when he joins so that we know, and
yes,
we
I will email that we're starting now and that to send me a message if he plans to join. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so then we start. Welcome everyone. Thank you very much again for joining us. So just for general information for everyone, now we have at the webinar as participants the members from the European Student Union and the members from the Erasmus Student Network. And for those who don't know, I'm Gohar. I'm the Vice President of the European Student Union. And together with Kostis, the President of the ESN, we will be facilitating the webinar and the questions and answers and the discussion. And we have guest speakers to our webinar. You can see them here on the presentation. Oana Dumitrescu from Directorate General of Education, and Elena Tegovska from DGEAC as well. We were also supposed to host here Martin Schieferings, from the German National Agency, but unfortunately at this moment he's having technical problems to connect. But we have Claudia Peritore from the Italian National Agency, who is also one of our guest speakers and will be addressing your questions. So the questions are those which during this during these past 2 days we have collected from our members from ESU and ESN. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, so the questions are the ones that we collected from ESU and ESN members. We tried with Kostis and together with Sebastian to go through all of them and not have overlaps. So in total, we have something around 15 questions gathered, and we will be addressing all of them during the webinar. Besides these main questions, we will also have a Mentimeter platform online, which you can check right now. So if you go to menti.com and put the code 429882, you will also be able to post your questions online, like follow-up questions that you have. So we can address these questions at the end of the webinar. This is all for the participants, so beware, and on all the slides of the presentation you will have the code of Mentimeter available, so you can just go there and post your questions. So to continue with the presentation, as you all probably know, both ESU and ESN were pretty reactive to the situation that arose out of the outbreak of the coronavirus. So ESU has issued a reaction about the implications of COVID-19 for students, and ESN issued a statement about the outbreak of COVID-19, after which we were in touch, of course, with all our members and also with all the external colleagues, including from the national agencies and European Commission, and we're trying to understand the situation and understand and help with the problems of the students. Besides that, ESN was doing an action for which now I give the floor to Kostis, so he will explain what was happening.
Yes, thank you, Gohar. Thank you all for joining the call today. Before we proceed with the questions, just to give you a very brief background, yes, both of our organizations did many actions in order to tackle this big challenge. Yesterday, actually, we released a survey in order to understand the impact that the coronavirus has to student mobility, and we are actually asking the international students directly to submit their answers in order to understand the impact. So now we are presenting preliminary results. As I said, we released the survey just yesterday, so it's less than 24 hours. And it's really impressive because already we have more than 3,000 answers from international students regarding the impact. So now, very briefly, you can see some of the numbers here. So I'm reading out loud. You can see that a lot of the concerns of the students are about not knowing whether to return home or not. 45% of the students have stayed in their Erasmus destination. And 36 have decided to return home, and 12% of they're still undecided. 65% have continued their mobility. So you can see that there is a discrepancy between the previous results. Basically, 45% of them, they went home. However, 65% of the students who responded, they stated that they are continuing their mobility. So this means that while they're back home, they're still they didn't interrupt their contract. And this is something that we will discuss later on regarding the online learning. And finally, 8% said that they have to return the full grant 17.7 said that they can only receive part of their money for the time that they were abroad. Many students, they have experienced many, they have to actually cover many costs. 70% is about transportation and some other costs that we'll discuss later. So yeah, we have already this kind of information, and the survey will be open until 30th of March. But we will check again the results early next week to see what is the situation. And after that, we will draft a report about the problems that the students are facing. So both our organizations, but the Commission, national agencies, and universities, to have an overview of what is happening on the ground and provide some better support to the students. So yeah, this is just a first context, and now we can maybe proceed with the first question, which is basically to address the European Commission. We want to ask you actually what were the actions that you took already. So what is the state so far? So maybe if you can start by explaining us the situation. I don't know if it will be Elena or Anna.
Thank you, Kostis. I will briefly explain you the state of play on our side. First of all, thank you for the invitation to this webinar. We are very happy also to see that it's a joint seminar of ESU and ESN, which we welcome very much. So basically, up until now, and considering the unprecedented situation, which is having actually a huge, not seen until now impact, not only on our stakeholders, so on our universities, but also and even more importantly on the students, who are experiencing different degrees of disruption during their mobility, sometimes even before. We are in close contact with the Erasmus Plus national agencies, who, as you know, are the first in line for the management of the student mobility, for making sure that the mobility is managed consistently, that the funds are managed consistently, that the quality is there, and so forth and so on. This would be in the normal situation. Now, considering this crisis situation that we have, we are continuing to be in close touch with the NAs, providing them with support on how to best address all the different scenarios that are happening on the ground. And there, the aim from the European Commission side is to provide a framework that is as flexible as possible, in order to give enough margin of maneuver, be it to the national agencies and then also reflected to the universities, in order to address as swiftly as possible the different situations we are experiencing on the ground. And we know that those situations are very different. The contexts of the students, the specific situations in which they are, really vary from one individual to another, which is perfectly normal, of course. What we want to avoid is coming up with too prescriptive rules that would not address all those different situations in which the students are today. So we have issued several notes to the national agencies that most of them, if not all of them, have reflected and have transferred to their universities. And the latest one was enabling national agencies and by default the universities to use the concept of force majeure in order to address any situation, any critical situation of the students on the ground, and to prevent as much as possible negative impact on the students themselves. This is why we have encouraged universities, of course, through communication with the NAs, but we are encouraging them as much as possible to, and when possible, of course, we know that not all of them, for not all of them, this is feasible, but when possible, then we encourage them in doing so. It is in implementing or developing online courses that we are then encouraging them to recognize the credits for all the students who are following those online courses, be it whether the student is still in the host university and is following the online courses from there, or has to return back to his home university and is able to follow the courses there. This is to prevent any disruption in the student's curricula. Of course, again, as much as possible, considering the gravity of the situation. But the force majeure also goes beyond this, this recognition aspect. It touches upon also the grants. And there again, we consider that with giving these possibilities to invoke the force majeure whenever it is needed, we give the possibilities to universities to be as flexible as possible in order, again, to prevent the students from being in a precarious situation. So thirdly, maybe, and to finish, we have also invited national agencies, but also universities, to be as much as possible in touch and to strengthen the cooperation with ESN, with ESU. We know that you are on the ground as well. You have already established many different ways of supporting the students that are the most at most in need. So we see also our role as facilitating this sort of cooperation and taking an active part in it. Therefore, for us, the objective of the webinar and of our participation today in this webinar, in addition to giving you this state of play that I have just done, is really to listen to you, to understand even better what are the different, the main different struggles, in addition to those that we already are aware of. But we are really eager to hear you and when necessarily to adapt the rules. We know that the situation is evolving every day. Therefore, we are ready to be also agile and as flexible as possible on our side to further adapt any additional element or to clarify any additional issue. And the final objective for us is also to identify ways in which we can even more strengthen the collaboration that we have with the student organizations, and to see how collectively and together we can best tackle the situation on the ground to the extent of our, and in the remit of our responsibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Elena. You have already starting, replying to the questions that we have for you, so that is really nice. Then now I will pass it to Gohar to continue with the next question.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much, Elena, for that. But because we have collected like very detailed questions, very precise and concrete questions, so now we will be addressing all of them because these come from our members. So, for example, as you mentioned, the case of force majeure, the clause of force majeure. So one of the questions that we have, when force majeure is being applied at this moment, the studies are terminated, can afterwards the students resume their studies at the host institution? Will there be some kind of a recommendation for this to the host institutions to give opportunity for students to resume studies, I don't know, in autumn, for example, or at some other point?
Yes, thank you, Gohar, for this question. Indeed, as I was saying, the concept of force majeure, as we see it, is very broad. This means that in that broad and flexible framework, there is the possibility for the student, when the force majeure is evoked, that he or she can continue their studies in the host institution later. However, this has to be agreed upon also between the host and the home institution together with the student. So this is not, again, a rule that we will be imposing from the European level side, saying that this must be the case. This is not something that that falls into our remit, but the rationale behind, and really our line that we will follow throughout the entire duration of this crisis, it's flexibility. So it's flexibility, and it's minimizing the negative impact on the students as much as possible. Therefore, we will be constantly encouraging universities and NAs, and we will be doing the same also on our side, to be as flexible as possible.
If I may just maybe also, Claudia, would you like to add anything on this question?
Yes, thank you indeed. I'd like to add a comment on what Elena already explained, because indeed this is the framework in which we as national agency are giving all the support possible to our institutions. We have provided institutions with guidelines deriving from the instructions received from the Commission, and the approach is the most favorable to students in order to find the best solutions for every single student. That is why, first of all, we always suggest, when we are approached by single students, the first suggestion we give is to keep a constant and continual communication with their home institutions, because the management of the single mobility has to be agreed with the home institutions to find the best solution for that student. And in relation to this particular question, in the framework of the flexible approach, indeed, it can be possible for students to resume their studies at the host institution later, provided it is agreed by both institutions, as Elena said, but also provided that the duration is maintained as already agreed, the learning agreement is adapted and feasible. I mean, there are many different aspects that have to be taken into account, and to help with that, the International Relations Office of the home institution is the right one to be approached.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then next.
Yes. Let's stay to the topic of force majeure, but related now to the grant that the students are receiving. It will be possible for the students, if they apply a force majeure, to receive the full grant of their mobility. And we are asking this because we see also from the survey that when the students go back, they still have to cover many costs. So, for example, if a student goes abroad for 6 months, he or she has to cover the accommodation for the full duration. And landlords, for example, or accommodation providers, they do not accept to stop the contract if they haven't fulfilled all the months. So there are many costs related to the student mobility, and we would like to ask you, what is in this situation? What do you advise?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, maybe do you want to start first, Claudia, or do you want me to address?
Yes, indeed, because this is an example of the concrete problems that students are facing right now with this extraordinary situation, and indeed there are many different problems. For instance, students that decide to interrupt their mobility, but we know that there are now some problems with traveling and going back home. So there are students in this kind of limbo when mobility is interrupted, but they cannot travel back home yet. And indeed, the institutions are ready to cater also for these needs. So these extraordinary expenses fall within the force majeure approach. So it is possible for students to ask their home institution to recognize these expenses, and the home institution can then liaise with the national agency to evaluate a single case and I can say, positively evaluated and recognize these extraordinary expenses connected to extraordinary travel or rent that to be paid, or also insurance expenses that that can be implied in these situations.
Mm-hmm. That's I'm very happy to hear this, because there are situations from students that unfortunately they didn't receive the whole grant. So maybe the European Commission has any recommendation about this towards the universities to be a bit more flexible? Because I think, Claudia, this is the case in your national agency, right? So maybe we...
You know, I think that now we are in a moment where information are not yet so coherent from the different sources, because as we discussed before, students are approaching many different institutions or also networks, and in a moment where the situation is not clear to everyone and is changing so fastly, it is possible that an interpretation that yesterday that we gave yesterday is not valid now today. So okay. We are in the, for instance, we are now delivering new guidelines to institutions, but giving support through the traditional help desk, email and phones. We already gave this answer, but there is no, there is the general framework, but not a general answer for everyone, because every case is different. There are students that can prove they have to pay this rent, or some others in a different situation that cannot. So we, indeed, the force majeure can be applied, but we always need to be realistic. And if the full grant is not recognized, it's because it is most favorable for the student that real costs are recognized. So this is the approach we are sharing with our institutions. We are trying to select the best solution possible. And I think that also the Commission agrees with this approach, not a single one for every student, but the best for every student.
Yes, Claudia, thank you very much. I can only but support what you just said, and emphasize that this is exactly the message that was indicated in the last note sent to NAs about the flexibility of the using of this force majeure concept and approach, and the fact that it has to be used always always at the benefit of the students. In that respect, we have encouraged all the national agencies to take this flexible approach and to encourage their higher education institutions, as the Italian National Agency has done, to reflect it on eventually on the students.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you both. This is a very valuable information to know, because we have many students coming to us asking the same questions that they're asking to national agencies or universities. So it is really important to align our response to that. So yeah, thank you. Gohar.
Yeah. Just to add to that as Claudia, you mentioned, like you are producing guidelines and recommendations for the institutions on like how to act on each situation. The problem is that we see that not all the agencies might have this approach, even though they might have already given some answers at the beginning. But yeah, we think there is some need to kind of give guidance, just like you are doing for the institutions, also for the Erasmus agencies, on to understand what are the issues and how to go forward. But I think we will still have time to elaborate on this idea.
We lost Goa.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, we lost
contact. Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Yeah, okay. So let's move to the next question.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Just a slight comment on what you just said, Goa, if I may. Indeed, there is a constant communication among the national agencies and the Commission in order to give coherent answers and to agree on a common approach. So exactly right now, again, directors are discussing with the Commission on further provisions, further guidelines. So indeed, there is this common guidelines that we share.
Yeah, definitely. But we just, because right now I'm also following the questions which are being posted on Mentimeter, just like a brief catch up on this, that also the universities might be kind of forcing the students to apply the clause of force majeure when they might not in reality need that. So it is always like we should be careful on communicating to the institutions the recommendations and the flexibility and the guidelines on like how to act. Going to the next question, but just like in the end, we will still have time to address the questions on Mentimeter. But now going on the next question on our slides, can the students go back home without applying the force majeure clause? So basically without canceling their studies. And by the way, you can also confirm these two for us, please, because so far as we understand, if the students apply the force majeure, this means that they cancel the study, what they were doing so far. So the question is, can the students go back home without applying the force majeure and be enrolled online at the host institution while being actually at home? Because anyways, the host institution is giving the study online, so they can easily attend it from their home.
Yes, thanks for the question. So to clarify on the force majeure approach, it doesn't only it's not only touching upon the cancellation of the mobility as such. It's a broader concept. As I said, it's a framework to be used whenever an adjustment in the situation of the student that is not foreseen by the current rules is needed. So this is when there is the possibility to apply the force majeure, and this is be it in case of modifying the timing of the mobility, cancelling it, changing the provisions. In all of those cases, there is the possibility to use the force majeure and to basically adjust to the situation, again, to the benefit of the student. So indeed, it is possible that, and this is something that I was mentioning in my introduction, that the student goes back to his host institution, but continues to follow online the courses. Mm-hmm. And in this case, we are encouraging NAs to encourage their universities to consider these online courses as normal courses, meaning that eventually they will give ECTS for them, and they will have obtained ECTS and recognize their curricula, their course, in order for the student not to lose a semester or a year in his or her curriculum. Basically, that's the main idea. So the force majeure, it's not something that has to be used only in the case of cancellation. It's really broader, and it's really this flexibility to adjust to the situation, to every situation.
Yeah, this is really, really important to hear from you, particularly in relation to this question, because we had many cases when the students were contacted by their universities and being told that you need to go back home, we're applying force majeure, and your grant is gonna be calculated only for the time that you have spent at our institution. So I think like institutions need to have this broad understanding of how to apply the force majeure.
I think that it is very important to use a common language and common definition. So if we all share the same meaning for force majeure, it would be easier, because it doesn't mean, as we are saying, cancellation of the study period in every case. I mean, it is the interruption of a study period, and what has been done academic-wise in that period can be completed then afterwards, even if back home, with the distance learning that the universities are providing. In Italy, as we all know, the situation just started before than other countries, and our universities have been closed since a month at least, and they are delivering normal academic activities online since a month, and they are providing that for regular students and for Erasmus students. So indeed, it is possible to complete the learning outcomes, and this activity has to be recognized. That's the main message.
Mm-hmm.
That's very good. What Gohar said also is that we have heard situations where the universities are suggesting the students to stay in their host country, continue their studies online. However, if they go back to their home country in order to continue online courses, then they will lose the grant. So yeah, we need to streamline this information.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think that we all need to clarify the maintenance of the grant when back home. That's a point that is still to be clarified.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. I think we also answered this question, right? So yeah, basically it's a follow-up. Yeah, follow-up of the previous one. So maybe we can continue to the next one in order not to lose time. Yeah, so if the host institution will require mobile students to travel back for exams, how can this be made possible through the Erasmus program? So here, basically, what happens if the student goes back home and then after 2 months, the situation is better, and then the host institution will require for them to go back to give the exams. This will be possible? They will get the fund to do this? What is the situation there?
So basically, this is again a very specific question. Ideally, here the advice would be to organize exams remotely, whenever possible and if possible. Now, to reply to the question that if the physical presence of the student is required at the host institution, then it will be up to the university to see whether there are some funds in order to support the student in his travel, for example, through using the organizational support. But again, this is a specific situation to which there are different possible answers regarding the specific context in which we are talking about. But ideally, we would say to not to oblige any student to come back to the host institution only for the exam, but rather see with the home institution whether an exam that is organized remotely is possible. But Claudia, if you want to add something.
Yes, indeed. What I want to add is that I really do hope that we will have this situation. I think that we won't have the situation there where students will be asked in 1 or 2 months to go
I agree
in the host institution. Unfortunately, the situation will like that for quite some time before we can travel again. So the exams are really likely to be online, and as Elena said, that would be the easiest solution for everyone in this context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Then we move to the next question. Yeah, this is, I know we spoke about the recognition of ECTS, but so if we will end up in a situation where the students terminate part of their studies and then they go back, so will that be possible to abolish the ECTS requirement so students will have more flexible solutions to pass the current academic semester? Yeah, currently they are not sure if they can keep the money that they have already received, as we addressed already, or if should they stay at a hosting university while the remote learning courses have not started yet.
Yeah, Gohar, I'm sorry, I don't think I understand exactly what you mean by abolish the ECTS requirement.
Because in order for the learning, in order for the mobility to actually happen according to the learning agreement, there should be a certain amount of ECTS earned by the students.
Yes.
So if they end up in a situation where at this moment their study is terminated, their host institution doesn't provide online education, doesn't support somehow them to finish the current semester, what they will do with this small part of the studies that they have done, while by the learning agreement they need to have ECTS to be recognized?
Yes, so again here, the main word is flexibility, of course. So let's say that a student has already acquired a certain amount of his ECTS as required by the learning agreement, but not all of those requirements. Obviously, any ECTS credits that were earned during the mobility and that should be recognized, of course. And the other ECTS that were initially foreseen in the grant, in the learning agreement, but due to the situation, the student was not able to acquire them because, let's say, that the university doesn't offer the possibility of online courses. The student shouldn't be penalized for that. And here again, the concept and the approach of force majeure has to be used. So the force majeure doesn't only apply to the grant of the student and to the mobility, to the process of the mobility, the duration, etc., but also to the learning agreement. Of course, we are really looking at it holistically and from the macro level.
Okay.
And it is important to be reminded that anyway, the recognition of the academic activities is always up to the home institution, is always up to the institution. Yes, that can evaluate the situation according to the academic of the students in order to find the best favorable solution for him or her.
Yeah, fully agree with that. And I think here comes the issue when we apply certain amount of flexibility on what universities can do, but then the universities do not apply the same flexibility for the students. So here is where the issue comes, and I think that is why it is important that when we speak about flexibility, we also make sure that the institutions apply flexibility for students. Thank you for your answers, and then we go to the next.
Yes, so here we have the case. For example, if there are students that they are already nominated to go on Erasmus, but then the university actually cancel the mobility. So what is happening there? Are those students going to have a more a flexible application next semester? They have to actually go with a full application, or they are going to be selected directly?
Well, the application process, as you know, is specific to each university in terms of selection requirements, in terms of the timing, etc. But obviously, here again, we would encourage universities to, as much as possible, offer Plan B mobility for all the students who are not able to go on mobility this year. Due to the coronavirus, and not put them through yet another selection procedure. So this would be the advice from the European Commission, and I think the national agencies. Claudia, if you want to add something, but that would be the ideal case. I think that we all have to find ways of applying this flexibility and of minimizing really the impact on everyone. So at one point it is a matter of using the good sense and being of a good will. So
yes, and it also relies on the mutual trust among institutions.
Exactly.
Because institutions need to discuss with their partner institutions about that, because there will be a moment when a host institution will have to accept more students than agreed in the interinstitutional agreement at the very beginning. And for that case, one of the solutions that the Commission provided for do cater for this need, because it is possible to prolong projects. That means the eligible time for the activities is longer, so that will also find a solution for these cases.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that this also depends if the student wants to go to the same institution next year, right? So if they want to go to the same institution, maybe they don't have to
because
go.
we have to bear in mind that anyway institution have to apply the criteria of equal treatment to all students.
Yes.
So also for those that will apply next year, it will have to be clear that there are some students coming from last semester, for instance. So the selection procedures have to be transparent and equal for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have to say that this is one of the most common questions that we're receiving. So before we have this webinar, we also gave the opportunity to international students to ask questions directly in our social media. And this one is the one that comes very often. So it's really important for them when they see this video to understand what is the situation.
Yeah, I think that every institution will then provide with procedures to acquire the intention of students to be mobile the next semester, then in order to find the best solution and to cater for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So the next question. So is it possible for students who are not on mobility at the moment, but have been selected, to start their Erasmus program if their host institutions are offering online learning now due to COVID-19 as a substitute to the traditional learning? So can we start new enrollments, but online?
I would say yes, this is a possibility. I mean, there is nothing preventing this from happening. Again, the final decision will have to be taken by the universities themselves, because we cannot substitute and make decisions for them. But definitely, this is something that is possible, taking into account the current situation. So let's say that there is a course in the learning agreement of the student that is now provided online due to the situation. The student would ideally be able to start following already that course as part of the mobility that was on which he cannot attend physically, but where he can follow that course online.
Yeah, this is very relevant that you are mentioning it, because when we were getting in touch with different national agencies, some of them were telling us that the universities are not allowed to recognize the online learning. So maybe, I don't know, maybe there is some...
Yeah, maybe this was before the note was sent out. So as I was saying, the last note to the national agencies, which clearly specifies that that any online courses, that we encourage any online courses to be recognized and to give access to recognize DCTS. So maybe this is an information, as Claudia said, we are adapting also our lines, our approaches almost on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So it is possible that some messages are not always in line, but this is due to the fact that we are really trying to act as rapidly as possible and to come up with adequate solutions together with the national agencies. So. Yeah.
So, and about that, really thank you for organizing this webinar, because indeed it is very important to share a common understanding on the situation, which is rapidly changing. And indeed, to be clear on that specific point, do I understand it correctly that this question that you gathered is related to mobilities that actually are not mobilities, do not start at all, and are completely realized at home, in the home country, only attending online distance learning at the host institution from start to the end.
So basically this becomes like a virtual mobility.
Yeah, without any physical bit, of course.
Yeah, probably not at this moment, but at the later, yeah.
probably at a later stage, but if we think of mobilities lasting 3 months, then it's likely that there won't be any physical bit in that mobility.
Okay. Then we go to the next question.
Yeah. Can you? Yeah. Well, the next question actually is it's very big and it's very specific actually, and yeah, it's a very difficult situation that I'm sure that you have heard many concerns from students already, but so basically,
Kostis, can I just say that there's a follow-up question from Martin? Does this mean that AGIs can continue sending virtual students throughout the semester?
So, sorry.
So maybe Martin. So yes, maybe Martin. So Martin is from the German National Agency. If you would like to maybe explain your question as well, what you meant by it, that would be fine as well.
I don't see at the moment Martin in the.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can.
But maybe I can address Martin's question, because I mean, so the question was, can universities continue to send virtually their students on mobility? I would say if all of the courses that were foreseen in the learning agreement are now suddenly available online, why not? Again, there is nothing from the European Commission side, at least, preventing this in doing so, and I don't think that that there is something also from the side of the national agencies. So again, here the idea is to be as flexible as possible, not to be an imposing mode, but if there is the possibility for the student to follow online courses instead of the physical courses that he was meant to study and to attend physically, considering the current situation, why not? At least within the framework set by the European Commission. Again, there is nothing preventing this of happening. Then again, it is up to every university. Again, here I am not talking on behalf of the higher education institutions. I am just explaining you that the framework that is set at the EU level is as large as possible in order to be adapted to any situation. So yeah, I think I have addressed the situation, but maybe if you want to clarify, or Claudia, if you want to.
Yeah, just to add the fact that this question, I think, is also related not only to the academic part, but also to the Erasmus grant, because if it is a mobility, then the Erasmus grant automatically goes with it. That's the kind of question that we are gathering as NAs for mobilities for virtual mobilities. So if we are now going to allow such mobilities which actually do not take place because students stay at home, having a significant and relevant academic experience for following distance courses, but then is the grant connected to it? Yeah. I think, Elena, that's the main.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
So, so here I cannot give you at this point a yes or no question, because this is something that that I need to consult colleagues upon. But if we consider that the grants that are given to the students for physical mobility are there to be used for additional costs occurred during the physical mobility, and considering the fact that here there will not be such additional costs, let's say, this is a question to be discussed. But I'm noting down this question, and we will be addressing it in the coming days. What I can reiterate is that from the point of view of the academic curricula, this is something that would be possible. Then the grant, this remains a question mark, because voila, there are other underlying issues that need to be clarified. And Oana, if you want to add something.
No, at this point, no.
Okay.
Just to say that I also already, we have Martin now joined on the screen. Maybe, yeah, you can all see him, and yeah. For any additional questions. Wait. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, I think the problem has been addressed. We've had this question coming from higher education institutions. They were not clear. I mean, the situation is clear for students that had to abort their stay abroad and students that were at the brink of going abroad. I think it's also clear for them. But would that mean that we continue with the program sending additional students virtually throughout the semester? Yeah.
Well, so again, if there are possibilities to resume with the mobility, because a university is offering all those physical courses now online, there is the possibility, but again, this will not be something that will be imposed nor forbidden from the European Commission side. So again, it is to be adapted in the specific context whenever possible, and if agreed with the student and with the host institution, at least there will be nothing preventing this from happening, with the clarification on the grant that we will come back in a few days' time.
Thank you. Then we go to the next question, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, so as I was saying before, there are many students that they are abroad, studying abroad, and they have to go back because of the situation. Many other students probably are finishing their mobility period currently, but in some cases it's very difficult for them to return back home because of the lockdown, because of cancellation of flights, and so on. And these students are stuck in a foreign country. Especially when in the case that these students require visa, this becomes even a big problem. So the question here is, what are the actions of the Commission in this case? Do you collect such cases from countries? Can you issue letters for the foreign affairs ministries and embassies? Because these students, they want to prolong their visas, but it's really difficult because of the situation. Are you aware of this?
Yes, so we are aware that there are such issues, and in those cases, again, we are not dealing with those cases centrally at European level, because we are not the ones who are on the ground and who are really in touch with the reality of the ground. But there, in any cases, what we advise the students is to be in constant touch with their national authorities, with the local embassy, either with the NEO office or with the national agency, in order to address the situation in the swiftest way possible. We know that there are different cases, different situations, and this is precisely why this is something that really needs to be dealt with by the local authorities, the embassy, and when possible, the national agency. Claudia, I don't know whether you have had such cases, and if you want to add something to this.
Not at the moment. Most of the queries we got are from students in Europe, but we expect to receive such queries, such situations. I was mentioning about that before, because we know that the issue of coming back to Italy is a big one, especially for the high number of Italian students that are currently in Spain, and now the solution has been solved. We know we are continuing liaising with our national authority, that is the Ministry for Higher Education, which is in constant contact with the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And in Italy, for instance, they've set up a crisis unit which is following up all the situation. Now is catering for travel back to Italy for students. It's hard. We know that there are many Italian students, workers, employers with different situations that are abroad and want to come back to Italy. So the problem is a common one, is not only for Erasmus students, but they are trying to find solution. It's not easy, especially for traveling back to Italy, because we have to rely on companies, on airlines, and it's not an easy task. So indeed, we are in contact and with the national authorities for that.
May I also add that also from our side, from the Commission, it's important, it's really good that you're signaling this issue and you're making us aware, because as well, we are in touch with national authorities, and also at a higher level, we can pass on the message and sensitize national authorities and ministries about this particular vulnerable group and the need to provide assistance in such cases, as well as special assistance in cases of support for students. So in that sense, it's really, really good that you provide us with this information, because we will definitely also pass the message that this is important. Of course, coordinated action is needed for these kind of situations because it's really, really sensitive, but it's very important to know that, to be aware in the first place that particular sensitivities appear in the case of international students.
Yes, yes. No, exactly. Thank you, Anna, for mentioning this. This is our purpose also, by why I bring this question now. And this situation is very important, especially for the international credit mobility, right? For European going to Erasmus Plus partner countries and vice versa. And we have seen this concern from many of our member organizations, because they are in contact with international students every day, and this is a scenario that comes very often. So maybe the national agencies or national authorities, they can provide some letters or some support for these students to prolong their visas, or yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Also from my side for this.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we can move on to the next question.
Yep. So yeah, this is about the fact that the European Commission, well, as you already said, like the flexibility goes to the national agencies of how they can deal with the situation. The question is kind of like more specific. Do you further intend to issue specific recommendations on which should be followed in which cases? Because I believe also that during this, as many days pass, we have a chance to hear as many cases as possible. And then will there be any follow-up recommendations? And we also believe that leaving the decisions only to the national agencies can lead to sometimes chaotic situation. So yeah, a bit more like your future actions that might follow on this.
Yes, so as I said in my introduction, Erasmus Plus is a program where we have different instances, different stakeholders, and everyone has its remits of responsibility, obligations. This is a program in which we are working together with the European Commission, with the national agencies, with the universities, with the student organizations. So it's not something where the European Commission drops responsibility to the national agencies and leaves them alone and says, okay, now you figure it out how you are going to go about, and we don't care. This is why up until now we have issued, I think, 4 or 5 notes with specific recommendations to the national agencies. the more the situation evolves, the more these recommendations are becoming specific, because we are confronted with more and more specific, of course, situations. But here again, the idea is not to try to address every single situation, because the risk there, by doing so, is that we will end up not treating equally every student, because we will not be in a position to address all possible situations, and then we will end up of not dealing or not addressing those situations that were not foreseen initially. So the approach that is taken here, again, is to set the framework to give as much flexibility as possible to the national agencies, and together with them, as Claudia said, and based on constant and daily consultation with us and with all different national agencies, to agree on a consistent and coherent next steps in dealing with different situations. So yes, the answer to the question is, of course, we are going to continue issuing different recommendation whenever this is needed. And we have already addressed some general messages on our Erasmus Plus website, where there is a specific web page on the coronavirus situation and on how to deal with it. We are going to update this page also probably with sector-specific issues. So at one point there will be specific elements there for higher education, for the higher education sector. So it's a continuous work, collective work, I would say, where everyone is concerned, everyone has its part of ownership, and everyone tries to do his best in dealing with the situation, without overstepping on the other one's responsibilities and duties.
Can I just add also that we are actually looking into very specific scenarios. So we're actually working now on many different scenarios that we can foresee. And of course, we understand how these can dynamically evolve, because the situation is really evolving hour by hour, day by day. And we are going to launch recommendations and all of these notes according to that. But then again, I can only reiterate what Elena said. We risk by saying these are the scenarios foreseen and these are the things that you need to do, that we miss out on certain scenarios and situations and actually leave out students in potentially vulnerable and sensitive situations. So that's why we choose to take this flexible approach, because we want to cater for the students at the end of the day.
Yes, and on my side, if I may add, indeed we are all facing this emergency context personally, also, and in our organization. So we all had to rearrange our working days, and I mean, we are, everyone is trying to do his best, and we are doing that. Among NAs, the communication has been constant, so it has never been interrupted, and also with the Commission. So because we need to confront ourselves, we really need to have a common approach, and that is what we are doing. So I really I'm convinced that what has happened in the past days, because it was very the situation was new for everyone. So we really didn't know what to expect. No one did know what to expect, not even the single student. So now the situation, we can in a way maybe also try to foresee what the best solution will be, and so that also cater for the solutions for students in a best way. But I feel that I need to reassure every student also on that national agencies do share a common approach with the Commission, of course.
I think, Gohar, you can also confirm this, but this is also the similar approach that our organizations are taking, right? So we have members in 42 or 45 different countries, and we are trying to stay connected and share the best practices, for example, or challenges that students are facing. and all of us, we are like, trying to provide support every day and be in contact with the national agencies. And this connection is very much needed, all together to work in order to support the international students.
Yeah, very much agree. But I want to check if Martin wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, I've been out of the webinar for a second. I'm sorry about that. So I'm not quite sure if what I'm going to say has been addressed already. I just wanted to support what the colleagues from the Commission just said. I don't really see the danger of chaos between the regulations of national agencies or the approaches that national agencies take, because there's a very, very, very intense discussion on all of these issues between the directors of national agencies on all levels with the European Commission and with, for us, I can say that with our universities. So I think actually there's basically nothing else we do at the moment than discussing with various actors on how we act in these times. So
yeah, just to make sure that we also do not undermine the work that you are doing, and we believe that you are providing the individual approach in case of Commission to the national agencies and Erasmus offices in partner countries, and in case of agencies to the universities. But we just, when we are also communicating with national agencies or universities, and particularly with students, we also see that a lot of the time there is this chaos that no one kind of really understands what to do. So therefore our question comes about recommendations, and as Elena said, this will be followed up. And also, yeah, we started this action right from the beginning of this week. So also a lot of the information that we receive is something gathered during this from the beginning of these 5 days, while you already started taking actions during these days. So yeah, just another encouragement from our side that we kind of see this need, and it's great that you are already doing it.
And just sorry, Gohar, to give an example about this, we see that, for example, within the same country, some universities are urging the international students to stay, and some other universities, they are encouraging them to go back. So, you know, the students, they hear from one to each other different information. So sometimes we hear also the same thing with home and university giving contradictory information. And yeah, especially for this case, whether if they should go back or stay, it's the biggest mess, to be honest, because there is no centralized direction or suggestion, not even in the same country. Yeah, that's why I'm using this concerns.
If I may, I would like to say about that this lies on their national regulation, of course, on the national measures adopted to contain the spread of the virus. And for instance, so in Italy, 10 days, we have a complete lockdown. So the panic arose when it had been forbidden to travel in and out of Italy, apart from specific needs. Also, coming back home is a recognized need, but then travel were not available anymore. So we experienced two overlapping questions. And this decision has to be made by the single person to stay in a country or go back in the home country according to the national situations there in the home country and in the host country, according to how secure and safe he or she feels.
Fully agree with that. But I think it is important to provide with best possible recommendations also to students, because I believe that a student might not really have the full available information and understanding of what is happening, rather than what an Erasmus agency representative or us or colleagues at the Commission might have. So I think it's just important to understand how we can support students to make possible decisions in this case. And just now I was also reading the questions that are being posted on Mentimeter, and a quick follow-up. Recommendations that are being sent by the Commission to the national agencies. Can this be somehow available also to us, so our member unions can follow up with the national agencies when they are communicating with the national agencies on that?
So as I said, we are working on providing more information on the website, on this webpage that exists already with general information on the coronavirus. And the idea is that we will update this page with additional information that will actually be based on what we will put in the official notes that we send to the national agencies. So you will be able to consult this page. If I am correct, I think that Oana has already sent to ESN and to ESU the most relevant parts taken from the notes that we sent to the NAs. So relevant parts that are tackling higher education, right, Oana?
I'm gonna follow up on that today. So
Okay.
I've already been in touch with ESN and with Gohar and with Kostis, and indeed I'm planning to send relevant information for students from all of the nodes to make this available to you. Also with the note that has already been sent out, but also with the notes that are coming. So we want to make this a more coordinated exercise, because we know that the information will reach students also just by forwarding it to national agencies and then to AGIs, but we think it's going to be faster if we also share this information with you, who can then disseminate it much faster through all of your network, and you have a much wider reach amongst the student population. So indeed, this is something we foresee to do just for the sake of the making the information faster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be very nice actually, and very helpful for us.
Yep, indeed.
Okay.
Go to the next question.
Yes, so question 12. If a mobility is interrupted due to the coronavirus, will those months spent in Erasmus be counted as months spent abroad? And we ask this because we know that the maximum duration for a mobility per academic cycle is 12 months. So if a student if the students have a two months mobility now because of the corona, and then they have to go back, if in the future wants to go on Erasmus again, what will be in this case?
So again, in this case, the force majeure concept will be possible to use it, and to if needed, to not to have those months that the student has spent abroad counting towards the maximum duration. Again, this will be decided on a case-by-case basis for those cases when it is needed, and the decision at the end will be taken by the higher education institutions, but we are providing the possibility for this to happen. Again, this is done not to penalize the student, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Then I think we move on. We're going to go to the Mentimeter questions, because some of them we were asking, some of them not. But this is like kind of a more general, like future-oriented question. If you manage to have these type of discussions, like how will this crisis affect the decision regarding the funding for the new Erasmus program? Are there any thoughts about this, or is it like still too early to speak about this? And what will be the long-term impact of this situation? What future actions, changes may come from the European Commission side?
Thank you for the questions, even though that I'm not sure I'm really in the position today to address them correctly. But what I can say at this stage is that the funding of the new Erasmus Plus program, as you know, is closely linked to the overall negotiations of the MFF of the next 7 years MFF budget. I think that the priority today is really to deal with the crisis situation, to make sure that we see the end of it, and while in it to make sure that we minimize the negative impact on everyone, from students to the universities to really to everyone. So this is really the priority today. The MFF budget, it remains to be seen what impact, and if any, this crisis will have on it. In terms of the long-term impact on the future actions and future decisions of the European Commission, again, the reply is the same as the previous one. But if I may address the impact that this situation can potentially have on the way the universities are developing and implementing their teaching, we are already seeing a huge increase in e-learning and online opportunities. Only over the weekend, we have seen a major shift in universities trying and implementing, putting in place really online courses, professors and teachers learning in one day how to deal and desacralizing a little bit this online teaching, and this is, if I can say so, in this very difficult situation, that we see this element as a potentially positive development in the overall higher education system in Europe. And this goes also very well in line with what we want to develop in the future program as regards to offering more blended learning opportunities, more online joint programs, etc., etc. So this is already one tendency that we have identified as a positive development in this very, very difficult situation.
If I may add also, some other measures that we've taken basically so far was to prolong some of the deadlines for some of the calls that we have.
Thank you, Anna, for this.
So we've prolonged the deadline for the call for the Erasmus Charter for Higher Education for the applications. We understand this is a very important call because it's supposed to cover the period 2021 to 2027, so the entire duration of the future program. And we have prolonged this deadline until the 26th of May. The initial deadline was 21st of April to enable higher education institutions, but also national agencies for supporting them to have more time in place to write the applications, to understand the applications more, and so on. We've also prolonged the deadline for strategic partnerships projects in all sectors, if I'm not mistaken, but specifically when it comes to us in higher education. And with regard to European universities, with the European Universities Initiative, I can say that I've been contacted by one of the alliances who explained what is the situation in the different universities that make out the alliance, and explaining how things are going, and explaining that they will follow up in case certain actions won't be able to be followed up. So we're doing the work day by day. We're in constant contact with everybody and all the actions that we're working on. But indeed, as Elena said, it's very difficult to reflect on the long-term impact at this stage, because day by day we're really at the stage where we're just dealing with the really urgent, most pressing issues. But I'm sure we will have updates for you on this in the weeks to come, when we will have more time to reflect and breathe a bit about it.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add to that, we just spread the news received from the team of the Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange that they are offering support to institutions, especially in order to train and give activities for the creation of online activities, of online teaching for online learning. So this is a resource, a useful resource, especially now.
I think it's important for us to know, for example, if there is any potential impact to the mobilities in the future, or for the program in general, in order to be ready as well as student organizations to support the international students and also to support you. This is why basically we are posing these questions. But yeah, probably it's already very, it's actually very early to come to certain conclusions. Just have in mind that we are here to support you. So if there is anything in the future, any strategy that you're going to design in order to tackle the impact of coronavirus to the Erasmus program, we are here in order to, to extend a hand of support for you as well.
Thank you very much for this, Kostis and Gohar. Much appreciated. As I said, the idea is really that we continue working together during the crisis, but obviously after it, and assess the different impacts together as well. I think that this webinar is only the beginning. This is something that we can reiterate in the next days or weeks whenever needed. We will be here to support you. We know that we can also count on you to support the different student situations on the ground, also with the help of the universities and national agencies. So from our side, as I said, we will be updating the website. Oana will be sending to you all the relevant parts for higher education that we have been sending to the national agencies in the past days regarding this crisis. So I think that it's an ongoing process for all of us, and that everyone will continue to adapt to the situation and trying to come up with the best possible solutions for everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think during the presentation we addressed a lot of questions from those which were being posted as follow-ups on the Mentimeter. Just a quick catch up with the questions that are posted here. I'm starting now from the end. So there is just an idea if there is any plan for prolonging the deadlines for universities in general, European-wide. I'm not sure if you are in position at this moment to give an answer to this.
So Anna already mentioned that the current deadlines that were ongoing have been postponed by a month. So this relates to the strategic partnerships cooperation, as well as to the application for the next Erasmus Charter for Higher Education for the 2021-2027 period. We start with these because those were ongoing. Now for the launching of the next program and for the deadlines there, this is something that we will have to assess in the coming weeks. At this stage, it is too early to say something concrete on that side.
Okay. Yeah, I think this was the most popular request, but you already said that you will share with us the guidelines and then also make them publicly available. Yeah, this is again about the recommendations. So you already answered it. Yeah, this is about the nomination period for 2020-2021. I think you, is this included in the prolongation of the deadlines that you mentioned already?
Yes, it will be part of the overall of the overall package, if I may say so. So depending on the duration of the crisis, we will take further steps if needed to address this as well.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be helpful for the agencies. Then, yeah, this is about the force majeure. I think we have already, you've already elaborated on this, because here the members ask if the force majeure can be applied by any other parties and not the student as a termination of the contract, but you clarified that the force majeure at this moment is not being applied as a termination, right?
Not only, it
not
can,
only.
it,
yeah.
yes. Yeah.
But then still, can any other party rather than the student apply the clause?
Normally it's the university who decides, the higher education institution who decides to apply the clause of force majeure, and if they do so, they are doing it for the benefit of the students.
Okay. So they can basically like force it on the student, in a sense.
The force measure, as Elena was saying, is a solution that is available to the institution to help the student. It's not something that will be imposed. I mean, we also got the information from some universities that some of their students who are actually abroad on mobility are not willing to come back home. So the institution explained that there was a possible solution, but students didn't want to apply it. So it will not be imposed by the institution. It's only a solution, a positive one for the students.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful to know. Then, yeah, I think you elaborated on this, talking about the flexibility.
If I may ask something to this, because I think it's important to keep in mind that we have been having issues with recognition regardless of the coronavirus before. And I think this is something we need to be aware also that that there could be students that will have problems with this. I mean, it's important that the Commission stresses the fact that IES need to be flexible in recognizing online courses. But there's no experience for many universities throughout Europe to deal with this. Now, the good thing might be that this crisis will actually help us in getting better recognition for online courses. But I'm just trying to remind ourselves that this can be problematic. And this is really something that we need to discuss with the universities. I think it's an important issue. And it's good that the Commission has a clear position on this. This will help us very much in communicating with the universities. But then it's not a decision that that Erasmus coordinators at the universities take. They do not recognize. And I think it's something that we really need to work on together with the Commission and the universities to make clear that all the relevant actors at the universities understand the situation and they are asked to be flexible in this regard.
Yeah.
On board, yes. Yes, I fully agree, yeah.
Yeah, fully agree. And also it is important for us and our members to have the recommendation in place from the European level so that we also know what to refer to when demanding also something from the universities. Yeah, this is again about the flexibility that has been answered.
Can I just, sorry, if I can just intervene, there's someone who wrote a comment regarding the question on the deadlines, and indeed, I think he was misunderstood the question on the deadlines, because the question that they had was whether there are any plans for deadlines to apply for universities to be prolonged at European-wide. So it was not a question about Erasmus, it was a question about application to university studies by students who are just graduating from high school, right? And I just wanted to clarify that for us, we don't have the capacity as European Commission to reply to that question, because we're monitoring the situation of what is happening in different member states, and we see that there's different measures that have been taken. Some of them have already postponed their examinations for entry into higher education. Some of them have maintained the deadlines as such. Some of them are taking different measures in the way they are selecting students to go into higher education. And I'm afraid that this is something that is quite up to the member state to decide at this stage. So unfortunately, from our side, it's very hard, especially only from the Erasmus Plus team, to give an answer to this question. But I wanted to reflect on it because I didn't want the person who asked it to feel like we didn't want to address his specific question or her specific question.
Maybe
so thanks to Anna for the
this.
clarification. Yeah.
Yeah.
From the German perspective, I can say that all federal states within Germany have postponed the start of the next semester until, depending on between end of April, middle of May. One of our partner organizations, they have created an interactive map where you can see all the starting dates. I think it would be important in this regard to also liaise with the national rectors conferences, because I think that this will be information that they will need to have and need to communicate, and we can try, and we will try to communicate the situation in Germany also through our channels. But I agree that it will be very difficult to do this. I mean, there's more than 3,000 universities. It will be very difficult to have one picture where you can have all this information. I think this is really something that we need to solve on a national basis and try how we can combine the information we have.
Yeah. Thank you for that specification. Then the next question on the screen is about the expenses, but as you mentioned, like you will promote the approach of the actual expenses if that is useful for the students, as far as I understand.
Yes.
Okay. So we answer this too. Then, yeah, this is actually very important. So if the students are not satisfied with the decision that a higher education might take, and maybe also colleagues from national agencies can respond to this, what will happen? Will the students have any other way to deal with the problem?
Shall I answer? I think that this is something that maybe it has already happened in a normal mobility. So a student can then highlight the situation also to us, for instance, to the national agency, so that we can discuss with the higher education institution the single case. It happens usually for a specific case that the national agency is consulted to find a solution, the best solution for the student, but also the students' representatives is a good point to address to find an answer to that.
Can I also intervene? So we, in fact, we receive a number of questions from students, complaints, or situations like these on a daily basis with regard to normal mobility. So I think in this case as well, what we advise is that, first of all, the student should seek to find ways that the first point of call is they address this with the higher education institution. They see if there's appeal procedures in place with the higher education institution. They try to take a point of understanding within the higher education institution. Then, if that is not possible, I would say redirect the query and the complaint to the national agency, as Claudia said, who can then get in touch with the HEI, see exactly what is the situation. Because quite often, if these questions come to us in the commission, it's very hard for us to make a decision over that, because it's very much between the university and the student. And in some cases, the student is fully right. In other cases, I have to say that it's more the university. So that is, again, a very specific situation that can differ from person to person. So I think appeal procedures should be in place, and they should go for this subsidiarity level. Like, they should be, addressed from the lowest point of call to the highest, I think. Like any other complaint about mobility.
Okay, thank you. Then we move to the next one. This is this is a really hard situation, but it will be interesting to understand if the national agencies can somehow support the students in this case to get any medical certificates, or because
it's a very difficult issue, a very difficult question. I mean, we all know that testing capacities are very limited in some countries, and for us in Germany, I wouldn't see how we can support students with that.
Okay. But in this case, what do you think, what kind of other solutions we can provide to students in this case? Because it means that they are just stuck in a country from where they cannot move back to their home country. So what can we do to support them?
Again, the suggestion to liaise with the national diplomatic representation of their own country is a very important one. They can find help from them, because also, as also Martin was saying, the issue of testing is a very critical one in every country. So the national agencies can hardly help with that, if not being of support for the students in guiding them to connect with the national representation.
Okay. Yeah, then we move to the next question. Yeah, I think Oana tried to answer to this already.
Yes, we're basically keeping in contact, and we're aware of each situation of each alliance, and they are going to communicate with us whether certain deliveries are going to be delayed or the way they're going to continue on certain projects. Of course, the same as all of us, the same as us as well, people are continuing to work remotely, so their work is still continuing to be done, but we are monitoring that.
Yeah. Okay, then the next question is about the force majeure, which you clarified, like what is the current understanding of force majeure that institutions should apply. I think we can mark this as answered. Okay, this is also about the force majeure. Yeah, this is about the new applicants. Will the applicants have to apply in the same pool as the new applicants? So those who are at the moment not allowed to go on to their mobilities.
Maybe this is it refers to what I was saying about equal treatment and equity for all students. No, I didn't mean that students have to apply again necessarily, but again it depends on the arrangements of every home institution. So the institution that agrees to postpone the mobilities in the next semester or in the next academic year has the possibility to foresee that, to do so, but the institution needs to apply the same rules to every student. So the selection has to be equal, and it has to be clear to the pool of selected students who has been selected for which destination. So there is this possibility, but it's not so smooth, it's not so direct for institutions to apply. Just to make clear that indeed it is as everything we are discussing about today in this webinar. This is the general framework, but then in concrete, it depends on many different aspects. So institution basically can foresee for students to postpone the mobility in the next semester, but have to cater for all the students.
Okay. And then go to the, I mean, Martin, if you would need to add anything, just.
Oh, all good.
Then we go to the next question on the screen. So we have only 2 left. Oh yeah, this is important because some of the universities are the ones who are providing accommodation for their students. Yeah, if the national agencies can comment on this, whether in this type of situation, the universities can force the students out from their accommodation, or has this happened, or anything on the topic.
May I ask, did you receive any situation about that, of this kind?
We had some queries because students are being told that they need to leave, so they need to go.
Yes.
But has this instruction come from dormitories or from private renting?
Dormitories.
Dormitories.
Yes.
The thing is, so I read, when I read the question, I don't understand the exact situation, because why are they asking them to go out? Are they trying to, it really depends, to be honest. Is it for their safety? Have there been cases of corona? I don't know. You see what I mean?
So, yeah, I will at least comment from the side of ESN the inquiries that we have received from the students. So there are some dormitories with both local and international students, right? So due to the situation, the university, for example, has asked all the students to evacuate the dormitory and go and live with their parents or to their houses and so on.
Yeah.
But this for local students, it's okay. It's very easy. For international students, it's a problem because maybe they cannot go back to their countries for different reasons. And we have seen this case. It's not a general one, but we have received this inquiry.
Well, from my point of view, actually, it's not even possible to ask a student to do that, not even a local one, because if national provisions foresee that people do not have to move, not even within the country, then not even local students have to go back home. If we think about Italy, maybe in a dormitory in the north of Italy, there are students coming from the very south, so it wouldn't be feasible. So really, we should then see further into the specific case.
Yeah.
Yes, I think as a rule of thumb, I would say that if this is the situation, and for some reason or the other, in exceptional cases that students need to leave their dorm, I would say that there should be special assistance on providing alternative accommodation for international students or Erasmus students, I would say. And this is something that we are communicating to the national authorities to ensure assistance, basic service provision for international students and mobile students, like accommodation or healthcare. So this is maybe a recommendation that we could make. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much agree. Then to the next question. Well, the final question.
Just sorry, Gohar. For this situation, maybe it depends on which country is it. Should we contact the national agency to inform you about this? Should we? What we do in this case where dormitories are evacuated?
Well, I would suggest to do so, to see in which country it has happened, and then ask the national agency.
Okay, thank you.
And then the final question, yeah, it is if you can add anything about the situation of international students who aren't in the Erasmus scheme. And of course, like we agreed that we will be speaking about Erasmus students, but also there are a lot of other students on international degree studies. Do you maybe know anything that is happening on this topic, or should we seek sources of information elsewhere?
So to be honest, we were focused, now we are really being focused on supporting students who are in the Erasmus scheme. But from the general point of view, what we can say for all the international degree seeking students is that, I mean, as Claudia said, the best advice that we can give is stay in touch with your local embassy, with the national authorities, and follow the guidelines of the authority, of the national authority of the country in which you are, staying in touch also with your home country. So this is from my side an advice that I could give, but maybe colleagues from the NAs want to add something.
Well, I would like to add something from the DAAD perspective. I mean, we of course are in a situation that we have Erasmus, but we have a number of additional funding programs. And what I can say is that it depends very much on the funding institution. I mean, federal ministries have other rules and restrictions and deal with this differently than the European Commission does. So it's hard to give a general answer. It also depends on the countries we're speaking about. There's countries where we explicitly asked our scholarship holders to come back home. We didn't do that for Erasmus, obviously, but for other countries, we had to do that. There is countries, and there's a list from the Federal Foreign Office where people are asked to enlist themselves on this list, and there is actually charter flights being organized from the federal government to bring these people home. But it's difficult. I mean, if there's a specific question for Germans abroad, from Germans abroad, from German students, or something like this, I would suggest you get in touch with us bilaterally, and then we can inform about this. We have all this information on the DAAD website. We have a specific website on Erasmus and Corona, and we have another one for the DAAD and Corona. And we are in close contact with our colleagues. There's a crisis committee. We are meeting daily at the moment and exchanging this information. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about the situation of international students, but nothing that I could say now in general, because it very much depends on the program.
Yeah. And in our case, as Erasmus National Agency, we're also focusing on the situation of Erasmus students, but the national authority, the Ministry for Higher Education, is in touch with the Conference of Rectors also for international students, of course, in different.
Yeah, just because I think it is also important that we remember that not all the international students are Erasmus students, but this is also something for us to deal with and understand how we can further support the other international students. But thank you very much. Kostis, do you, or any of you, do you want to add any closing remarks, additional remarks before we close the webinar?
Actually, I have one short question that just was posted to me by a colleague. We've talked about recognition of online study periods abroad. Maybe you talked about this before I entered the webinar, but what we are not so sure of is how do we deal with internships? If an intern is asked to work from a home office, do the same rules apply for internships that apply for students and study periods?
Yes, indeed. The idea is that the same rules and the same flexibility we are giving for students which are undertaking mobility for studies apply also for a mobility in case of traineeships.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Yeah. So, Kostis, you want to say something?
I have some final remarks, but if the other colleagues, maybe they want to first say anything. I don't know if they have any other comments.
Not really a comment, but just briefly from my side, I would like to thank you again, both ESN and EASU and Azul, for organizing this joint webinar with the Commission and with us two NAs. It is very important also to give a positive message that we are all on board, we are in the first line, we are facing this situation, and we all do our best to support the students that need it. So thank you again very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you as well. Kostis?
Yeah, no, my final remark is in the same direction as with Claudia. First of all, I would like to thank you, Gohar and Esu, for this initiative and actually inviting us to take part. I think this is the first time that we have a call with the representatives from both national student unions and the national branches of ESN, which is it's an amazing initiative, and I think that we should continue doing this in the future because we both support international students. One organization complements the other, and I think that especially in these difficult times, we have to stick together and provide any kind of support that we can. And at the same time, I would like to thank the colleagues from the national agencies and from the European Commission for accepting to be here and hear our concerns and the concerns from our representatives, but also from the students. Just to remind you that we have an open survey for the next 10 days where we are gathering input from the students. So we will need your help to disseminate the survey. Only in one day, we managed to gather 3,000 responses. So this means that the students are very, very concerned, and they want actually to very eagerly to reply in a survey, which in other cases is very difficult to, to put the students to fill this kind of surveys. So yes, this is from my side, and thank you everyone for joining this call.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We will make sure to circulate the presentation that we used. Particularly also, we will send both the presentation and the recording to the other colleagues from national Erasmus offices. And by the way, for the information of everyone, there were a lot of Erasmus agencies who actually really wanted to join this call and follow the webinar, but because we have limitation of the number of participants, we couldn't have them in, but that's why we will have the recording and we will circulate the whole information so everyone has access to it. We started the call with around 80 participants. At the moment, we're still 66, and the webinar lasted for 2 hours. So thank you all so much for all your time. And I really just hope that all these hours that we spent on this will be helpful and useful in supporting the students out there who are really left in some uncertain situation. Thank you, and yeah, wishing you all a good, healthy evening and the rest of the months until we figure out how to get back to the normal life. Thank you very much.
Thank you
so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.